Hey everybody, nice quiet Saturday here. Trying to make some progress on this Model 41 rear. If you remember, we had to take these gears out of that axle that Matt brought over. They're in good shape. I have the pinion in. I changed the bearings, put the pinion in, set the rotational torque. We came in perfect at 16 inch-pounds of rotational torque, just the high end of the spec, but they're new bearings, so I feel okay about it. I just swapped over the ring gear to the original carrier that came out of this 41, and I put the bolts in. See if you can see that. Okay, lock straps are not there. I think I've talked about that enough. I think I've shown you how the bolts loosen up enough. This is the final time you're going to hear it. If you have the lock straps in your Jeep, you know, there's nothing you can do about it unless you take it apart. But if you're rebuilding your axle and you put the lock straps in there, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So, these are grade 8 ring gear bolts. They have red Loctite on them. Make sure your ring gear and your bolts are squeaky clean, and 55 foot-pounds. Now when you go and you try and buy this bolt, you would think it's a standard ring gear bolt. And that, let me try and zoom you in here. That is a standard ring gear bolt, and that's what everybody's going to sell you. And they're way too short. You saw me address this when I was building that axle for that Jeep that was going out to Moab. This is a Model 41 bolt. Much longer, much bigger shoulder, and as far as I know, I've looked everywhere and I can't find a quality bolt for a 41. So when I did that other axle, if you follow along with all my videos, you saw that I went to hardened washers, aircraft bolts, safety wire. That's a good way to go. The bolts are plenty strong. They're not going to fail. It's a little expensive, but it works. I was able to find, I was digging through all my parts, and I was able to come up with just 10 of these longer bolts. Well, actually 11, because here's another one, but this one looks like I might have pulled it out of something. Looks used, but I found 10 new bolts. So I feel good about this, and like I say, red Loctite, 55 foot-pounds, and that ring gear isn't going anywhere. Now, the next thing, I'm taking this ring and pinion out of one housing, putting it in another. I had to fuss getting the pinion rotational torque because it's just coming out of a different axle. So, what I like to do, and you've seen me do this before, is have setup bearings. Okay? Now this is just a bearing that the inside was honed out. And it fits over this easy. It's got to be a precision fit, but you want it to be hand tight. Okay, now, if I have to, I could swap carrier shims around without any trouble. I think what happens is, because you got to pull these every time, and a lot of different manufacturers put their shims on the outside, but Dana always stuck them underneath the bearing. Sometimes you can shim on the outside of the cup, but not here. So, don't use a used bearing if you're going to do this. Don't take a used bearing out of an axle, hone it out, and use it. Get a brand new bearing, hone it out, and make it a slip fit. The easier it is to get at these shims, the more apt you are to get your backlash and your setup nice. I've seen a lot of guys just get it close enough, and they're like, oh, I don't want to take the bearings off again. And a lot of times you could ruin the bearing. If the puller slips, you could pull the cage off. It's worth getting some setup bearings. Once I know this is right, I'll put the new cups on there. Once I know this is right, I'll come back to the bench, pop these off, tap the new ones on, and we know we're good. It's worth the effort. Even if you're doing one axle, it's worth the effort to have some setup bearings if you don't know where you are. And on this particular axle, I think we're going to be close with the carrier shims, but because we're changing the ring and pinion, I don't know exactly where we're going to be. We may be too loose, we may be too tight, but if either of those cases happens, pop that off, switch the shims around, and we're back in business. So, just a little tip for you. I have setup bearings for the common axles that I do. The front Dana 30s, the front model 25s, 27s, the 41, the 44. I have a lot of setup bearings. Saves me a lot of time and allows me to get a real accurate setup. So, just something you might want to think about if you're having trouble and you're tired of pulling carrier bearings off. That's just a good way to go about it. So, enough talk about the bolts and the bearings. I'm going to drop it into case and see where we're at. Okay, I had to fuss with those shims quite a bit. It took 3 shim movements to get us to the right backlash. Now, backlash on a 41 and a 44 is 6 to 10 thousandths. So let's see what we got here. Alright, 0. And looks like we're right at 7.5. You can see that. So, we're right in spec for backlash. And I feel real confident on the pinion depth. So what we're going to have to do now is run a tooth pattern and see what it looks like in there. But having those bearings able to come off, like I say, I changed shims 3 times, and on the bolt side right now I'm only running a single 5,000 shim, and I've got I think 66 thousandths on the tooth side. So I was not expecting that, but we have the good backlash. The bearings are preloaded properly. You know, you need to have some squeeze on those because when that's working, that pinion just wants to take that ring gear and push it to the side. So you make sure you have enough preload on your bearings where that's not going to happen. So I've got all that right, and like I say, just pulling the bearings off by hand is much better than setting up the puller and pulling each bearing 3 times. So just something to think about when you're doing your next rear. Maybe make some setup bearings. But I'm going to run a tooth pattern, and then I'm going to pull that whole assembly out again, put the real bearings on, put it back in, and torque the bolts. Okay, ring and pinion setup on the 41 is complete. New bearings are installed, and our bearing caps are in the right orientation. You got a sideways 0 there and a sideways 0 there, a vertical one here and vertical one here. This should be a long-lasting rear axle for David, and he can put a lot of miles on that without any worries. And I have everything ready to go. I'm ready to put the pinion seals in both the front and the rear, but I don't know if you can see that. There's a deep groove in this. This is for the rear. That needs a speedy sleeve. And this front, lighting's bad, but it's really, the seal just completely wore a deep groove in that one. So I I used my last 2 speedy sleeves on his transfer case yokes. I've got 2 more for Monday. so I will put that together. And I have been getting some questions on how the Snowblower Jeep is going, and I don't know where I left off on YouTube and where I picked up on Facebook, but I know some of you guys don't do both of them, so I'm going to go over some stuff. It may be redundant for guys that follow me on other places, but I'll show you what I've been doing on that. It's been so busy with engine builds and axles and transmissions and transfer cases, I haven't had much time to work on it. But I've been making, little progress on it. So let me get set up. I'll show you a few different things on that and bring you guys up to date. Okay, Snowblower Jeep is still in primer. I've been putting some high build on the hood. There's a fender in there. You see those holes? See those holes around the body? I needed to make some fenders for the dual wheel setup, and my tow truck had an original set of fenders. I didn't have any for here, so there's one that's upside down. I made some fenders. Hang in there with me, I'll try and get some shots. Okay, these are made out of 14 gauge material. Very, very tough to move. I made them a couple different ways. I think I showed these on Facebook. I'm not sure where I put stuff. I kind of got aggravated with YouTube a while ago and quit making videos. Moved over to Facebook, and that's even worse. So I'm back on YouTube now. So between the flanger to flange this, I had some radius dies to make the edge here, the kick shrinker, and the English wheel. I was able to pop out a couple of fenders. That was the last piece I needed to make before paint. Well, like I say, that 14 gauge, that's tough to move, but they came out very nice. I'm super happy with them, and they're fit to the body already and just need to be bolted on. The steel that you see there and some angle iron here, that's going to make my F-head engine mount cradle. The engine in the F-head that goes in the bed gets a cover over it, but it's on a rigid mount, and then there's some support that comes off of your drawbar and goes back to it. So I'm working on that now, and I've tried to get the engine rebuilt 3 or 4 different times, but customer projects take over. And I have a very nice block that's bored. I was able to get away with 20 over pistons in it. But the most critical thing that I've been working on is the crankshaft and the flywheel. So I'll dig that out and show you what's happening with that. Okay guys, here is the F-head Snowblower engine crankshaft. It's been ground, and I had to make this flywheel. So I started with just a chunk of I think it was 12.5 inch diameter, 2.5 inch thick, just standard 10/18, and I turned all the diameters I needed. This is going to pick up our bearing. I've got the upgraded later style bolts in the flywheel, drilled the crankshaft and reamed that. I have some fine thread bolts that are going to go in there, some high quality ones. This is the original ring that came with the PTO clutch and this is the friction disc, and there'd be 3 of these in here. You know, they'll go all around there, and that's what the clutch, the hand clutch, is going to bite onto to give power or stop power to the drive shaft. So I had a lot of diameters I had to turn. This ID had to be right on the money. I've got grade 9s. I've got Nordlock wedge washers in there, Loctite, that won't go anywhere. I had to cut the ring gear diameter very accurately because I had to heat that up and shrink it on there. And of course, the bearing that goes in there. Now let me show you what's happening. Here is my Rockford clutch that is going on the back of the F-head engine. And it'll be operated from in the cab. I'll make some linkage to the lever, and that's how it was originally on the Wisconsin. So you can see this chunk of steel started out as an 80-pound chunk of steel, and right now when I weigh a stock flywheel and a 9 1/4 inch clutch and pressure plate, it comes out to 43 pounds. And I just kept removing material where I could, where it wasn't going to be crazy, you know, and hurt the strength of the flywheel. And right now I have this flywheel at the exact, to the ounce, at the exact same weight as a factory setup. So I finished this a while ago. I'll try and get some pictures of me making it. I think I have them on my phone. I'm not sure how to get them off there and onto YouTube, but I'll see if Maria can help me with that. So basically, your friction disc is in constant, it's right in here all the time, so it's always spinning when the engine's on. And right here, okay, it'll be spinning in there, and then when you pull the lever, these discs will clamp that tight, and that's what's going to drive and give power to the drive shaft. So it's all in this lever. This is always spinning. These are spinning around in here. There's only one in, so it's kind of hard to move it. And then this bearing is going to be supported in there. So there was a lot of figuring and making sure all dimensions were right. A lot of work went into that flywheel. That is going to go out and get balanced. And then I have to make a bell housing to connect my clutch to the back of the engine. And once this comes back from balancing, and I haven't even had a chance to get it over there, but once this comes back, I'm going to put the crankshaft in the engine like I'm building it, put the flywheel on it for good, and then start taking measurements to adapt the Rockford hand clutch to the back of the engine. So there's a lot going on. A lot of time has been spent trying to get all this stuff just right. Like I say, it might have been easier to go with the Wisconsin, but you know, they made them with the F-heads, and I'm not a real fan of the Wisconsin air-cooled engines. I'm not an air-cooled engine guy, so I am going to build a enclosure, kind of like you'd see on a welder, the old Hobart welders with the Willys engine in them. I'll build an enclosure that'll sit in the back, and then I'll start figuring out the drive shaft angles and stuff like that from the clutch. So there is a lot going on. I have a complete pile of stuff to build a 100% new old stock part engine. I've got a camshaft, I've got tappets, I've got timing gears, I've got an oil pump rebuild kit, I've got everything internally. I am using modern rings and new bearings, but I have everything else, critical stuff, new old stock for this engine. Like I say, I only had to bore at 20. It's a real good block. Crankshaft is in real good shape. Rear main seal area is perfect. And I just got to start figuring out what I'm going to do for rear main seals. If you've been watching the videos, you see I had some trouble with the best gasket company's rear main seal, and they won't even talk to me. I tried to get some information from them, tried to see if I had a bad seal, a bad run of them. I've called them, I've emailed them, I've tried all different things, sent them some pictures, sent them some dimensions of cranks and their seal, but they won't even talk to me. So they're off the list for potential rear main seals because I just can't trust them. So I will talk in depth about rear main seals when I put this crankshaft in the block, and that's what's going on. I've got a few more pieces that I can show you, and we'll keep moving and talking about the snowblower Jeep. Okay, there are the finished doors for the top of the snowblower Jeep. They are in primer. I have the glass for it. I have all the fuzzy channels made. I have all the mechanism working good. The door latches are working fine. And I have some new old stock handles that are going to go on the outside. So everything is done with those except for paint. And up on this 4-post lift is my Burma Jeep bomb service truck. And my plan was to take this 4-post lift, put it outside, right in front of the paint booth so I could lift stuff up and drive it in there. There's that CJ5 body that I started working on. More details on that soon. So let's go outside here. Okay, here's all that fresh stone I put down. And the booth. And I left plenty of room from the booth to the door. So I was planning on putting a cover-it building big enough to go over the peak of the roof and come back about 24 feet. Then I was going to stick the 4-post lift right in front of the door here, and I would have it under cover, and I would put a door on that end to keep the west wind and the storms from blowing in. That's facing dead west right there, and all our weather comes that way, and sometimes it wants to blow in here. But anyway, I started pricing out to cover-it buildings, and a couple of companies would work with me, but by the time I got the height I needed and the width and the length, they were anywhere from $7,000 to $11,000, and I just can't live with that for a soft fabric building. So I have some steel coming on Tuesday, and I am going to make a lightweight building out of steel. It's going to be 1¼ inch square tube, and it's going to go over the roof. It's going to match the roof line, and it's going to come back to the door opening, 21 feet, I think. I take a little more of that green roofing, put a roof on it, and then some siding, and just sit it on some 6x6 pressure treated timbers, and then build an end wall with a door. I've got to build some doors here, and I was hoping to have the snowblower Jeep sitting in here for the winter so I could free up the lift and work on some other things. But I can bring it in here with some ramps and stuff, but I'd really like to finish up, get another little shelter built for the lift, move the 4-post lift out here, and just work easier that way. So I was very surprised at the cost of those hoop type buildings, and I can do a whole lot of work for what they're asking for one of those. And again, I'm going to make it lightweight. It's not going to be fastened to the ground. It's just going to, I might put a couple anchors, one at each corner, but it's not going to be built into the ground or anything. And I'll show you that as it happens. But here's that CJ5 again. This has been dipped, and it really is in real nice shape. But there's areas that need attention, and there's a million holes in it, and there's a lot of dents in it. But I'll show you this as I get deeper into it. But well, that's about all I have for you today. I'm going to keep moving on those axles and get the hubs situated. Get the rear axles in. I might go over how to shim those one more time because I get a million questions on that. But I'm just going to take the rest of this quiet Saturday, lock the door, and get some work done so I can get these axles finished up. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. There'll be more next week sometime, and I will catch you then.